Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 11 of our reading of George Orwell's 1984. And in the last episode, Winston was still in the prole part of town, the poor sector, rather. Far different from the luxuriant part of town where he lives in. And he entered the shop where he bought the diary. And I think, or I got the idea that he was thinking of renting a room there so he could be away from Big Brother. The prying eyes of Big Brother. But we're going to see. Anyways, as always, I don't agree with everything that's said here. But I know that there's some racism and stuff in here that is basically just to make the world more shocking. The world more real and shocking. But anyways, here's the copyright information. This is a 1961 copy of the book. All rights reserved, including the right to reproduce this book or portions thereof in any form. So, that's why I'm going on. And we are going to continue reading. Find out what Winston decides. Move my bookmark over. And, he was, basically, in the previous paragraph, he was going over the fine features and imagining himself, completely isolated, away from Big Brother with no telescreen and just with the sound of, the kettle singing and the fire dancing, sitting in an armchair close to an open fire. So anyway, here we go. Oh, the ticking of the clock, rather. And the tea kettle and stuff. There's no telescreen, he could not help murmuring. Ah, said the old man. I never had one of those things. Too expensive, and I never seemed to feel the need of it, somehow. Now that's a nice gate leg table in the corner there, though of course you'd have to put new hinges on it if you wanted to use the flaps. There was a small bookcase on the other corner, and Winston had already gravitated towards it. It contained nothing but rubbish. The hunting down and destruction of books had been done with the same thoroughness in the prole quarters as everywhere else. It was very unlikely that there existed anywhere in Oceania a copy of a book printed earlier than 1960. The old man still carrying the lamp was standing in front of a picture in a rosewood frame which hung on the other side of the fireplace opposite the bed. Now, if you happen to be interested in old prints at all, he began delicately. Winston came across to examine the picture. It was a steel engraving of an oval building and rectangular windows and a small tower in front. There was a railing running round the building, and at the rear end there was what appeared to be a statue. Winston gazed at it for some moments. It seemed vaguely familiar, though he did not remember the statue. The frame's fixed to the wall, said the old man, but I could unscrew it for you, I dare say. I know that building, said Winston finally. It's a ruin now, in the middle of the street outside, the Palace of Justice. That's right, outside the law courts. It was bombed many years ago. It was a church at one time, St. Clement's Dane, its name was. He smiled apologetically, as though conscious of saying something slightly ridiculous, and added, Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's. What's that? Said Winston. Oh, oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's? Well, that's a rhyme we had when I was little boy. How it goes on I don't remember, but I do know it ended up, here comes a candle to light you to bed, here comes a chopper to chop off your head. It was a kind of dance. He held out his arms for you to pass under, and when they came to here comes the chopper to chop off your head, they brought down their arms down and caught you. It was just names of churches. All the London churches were in it. All the principal ones, that is. Winston wondered vaguely to what century the church belonged. It was always difficult to determine the age of a London building. Anything large and impressive, if it was reasonably new in appearance, was automatically claimed as having been built since the Revolution, while anything that was obviously of earlier date was ascribed to some dim period called the Middle Ages. The centuries of capitalism were held to have produced nothing of any value. One could not learn history from architecture any more than one could learn it from books, statues, inscriptions, memorial stones, the names of streets. Anything that might throw light upon the past had been systematically altered. I never knew it had been a church, he said. There's a lot of them left, really, said the old man, though they've been put to other uses. Now, how did that rhyme go? Ah, I've got it. Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's. You owe me 3 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. There now, that's as far as I can get. A farthing. That was a small copper coin. Looked something like a cent. Where was St. Martin's? Asked Winston. St. Martin's. That's still standing. It's in Victory Square alongside the picture gallery, a building with a kind of triangular porch and pillars out in front and a big flight of stairs. Winston knew the place well. It was a museum used for propaganda displays of various kinds, scale models of rocket bombs, and floating fortresses, waxwork tabulaes, illuminating enemy atrocities and the like. St. Martin in the Fields, it used to be called, supplemented the old man, though I don't recollect any fields anywhere in those parts. Winston did not buy the picture. It would have been an even more incongruous possession than the glass paperweight, and impossible to carry home unless it were taken out of the frame. But he lingered for some minutes more, talking to the old man, whose name he discovered was not Weeks, as one might have gathered from the inscription on the shop front, but Charrington. Mr. Charrington, it seemed, was a widower, aged 63, and had inhabited the shop for 30 years. Throughout that time, he had been intending to alter the name over the window, but had never quite got to the point of doing it. All the while that they were talking, the half-remembered rhyme kept running through Winston's head. Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's. You owe me 3 farthings, say the bells of St. Martin's. It was curious, but when you say it to yourself, you had the illusion of actually hearing bells, the bells of a lost London that still existed somewhere or other, disguised and forgotten. From one ghostly steeple to another, he seemed to hear them pealing forth. Yet, so far as he could remember, he had never in real life heard church bells ringing. He got away from Mr. Charrington and went down the stairs alone, so as not to let the old man see him reconnoitering the street before stepping out of the door. He had already made up his mind that after a suitable interval, a month, say, he would take a risk of visiting the shop again, and perhaps not more dangerous than shirking an evening at the center. The serious piece of folly had to come back there in the first place, after buying the diary and without knowing whether the proprietor of the shop could be trusted. However, yes, he thought again he should come back. He would buy further scraps of beautiful rubbish. He would buy the engraving of St. Clement's Dane, take it out of the frame, and carry it home concealed under the jacket of his overalls. He would drag the rest of that poem out of Charrington's memory, rather. Even the lunatic project of renting the room upstairs flashed momentarily through his mind again. For perhaps 5 seconds, exultations made him careless, and he stepped out onto the pavement without so much as a preliminary glance through the window. He had even started humming to an improvised tune. Oranges and lemons, say the bells of St. Clement's. You owe me 3 farthings, say the... Suddenly his heart seemed to have turned to ice and his bowels to water. A figure in blue overalls was coming down the pavement, not 10 meters away. It was the girl from the fiction department, the girl with dark hair. The light was failing, but there was no difficulty in recognizing her. She looked him straight in the face and walked quickly on, as though she had not seen him. For a few seconds, Winston was too paralyzed to move. Then he turned to the right and walked heavily away, not noticing for the moment that he was going the wrong direction. At any rate, one question was settled. There was no doubting any longer that the girl was spying on him. She must have followed him here because it was not credible that by pure chance she should have happened to be walking on the same evening up to the same obscure back street, kilometers distant from any quarter, where party members lived. It was too great a coincidence. Whether she was really an agent of the thought police or simply an amateur spy actuated by officiousness hardly mattered. It was enough that she was watching him. Probably she had seen him going into the pub as well. It was an effort to walk. The lump of glass in his pocket banged against his thigh at each step, and he was half-minded to take it out and throw it away. The worst thing was the pain. The worst thing was the pain in his belly. For a couple of minutes, he had the feeling that he would die if he did not reach a lavatory soon. But there would be no public lavatories in a quarter like this. Then the spasm passed, leaving a dull ache behind. The street was a blind alley. Winston halted, stood for several seconds, wondering vaguely what to do, then turned around and began to retrace his steps. As he turned, it occurred to him that the girl had only passed him 3 minutes ago, and that by running he could probably catch up to her. He could keep on her track till they were in some quiet place, and then smash her skull with a cobblestone? Cobblestone. Okay. The piece of glass in his pocket would be heavy enough for the job, but he abandoned the idea immediately, because even the thought of making any physical effort was unbearable. He could not run, he could not strike a blow. Besides, she was young and lusty and would defend herself. He thought also of hurrying to the community center and staying there till the place closed, so as to establish a partial alibi for the evening. But that too was impossible. A deadly lassitude had taken a hold of him. All he wanted was to get home quickly and then sit down and be quiet. It was after 22 hours when he got back to the flat. The light would be switched off at the main at 23:30. He went to the kitchen and swallowed nearly a teacup full of Victory gin. Then he went to the table in the alcove, sat down, and took the diary out of the drawer. But he did not open it at once. From the telescreen, a brassy female voice was squalling a patriotic song. He sat staring at the marbled cover of the book, trying without success to shut the voice out of his consciousness. It was at night that they came for you, always at night. The proper thing was to kill yourself before they got you. Undoubtedly, some people did so. Many of the disappearances were actually suicides, but it needed desperate courage to kill yourself in a world where firearms or any quick and certain poison was completely unprocurable. He thought with a kind of astonishment of the biological uselessness of pain and fear, the treachery of the human body, which always freezes into inertia at exactly the moment when a special effect is needed. He might have silenced the dark-haired girl if only he had acted quickly enough, but precisely because of an extremity of his danger, he had lost the power to act. It struck him that in moments of crisis, one is never fighting against an external enemy, but always against one's own body. Even now, in spite of the gin, the dull ache of his belly made consecutive thought impossible, and it is the same he perceived in all seemingly heroic and tragic situations. On the battlefield, in the torture chamber, on the sinking ship, the issues that you are fighting for are always forgotten, because the body swells up until it fills the universe, and even when you are not paralyzed by fright or screaming with pain, life is a moment-to-moment struggle against hunger or cold, or sleeplessness against a sour stomach, or an achy tooth. He opened the diary. It was important to write something down. The woman on the screen had started a new song. The voice seemed to stick into his brain like jagged splinters of glass. He tried to think of O'Brien for whom the diary was written, but instead he began thinking of the thing that would happen to him after the thought police took him away. It would not matter if they killed you at once. To be killed was what you expected, but before death, nobody spoke of such things, yet everyone knew of them. There was a routine of confession that had to be gone through. The groveling on the floor, the screaming for mercy, the cracking of broken bones, the smashed teeth, and bloody clots of hair. Why did you have to endure it, since the end was always the same? Why was it not possible to cut a few days or weeks out of your life? Nobody ever escaped detection, and nobody ever failed to confess. When once you had succumbed to thought crime, it was certain that by a given date you would be dead. Why then did the horror, which altered nothing, have to lie embedded in future time? He tried with little more success than before to summon up the image of O'Brien. "We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness," O'Brien had said to him. He knew what it meant, or thought he knew. The place where there was no darkness was the imagined future, which one would never see, but which by foreknowledge one could mystically share in. But with the voice from the telescreen nagging in his ear, he could not follow the train of thought further. He put a cigarette in his mouth. Half the tobacco promptly fell out onto his tongue, a bitter dust which was difficult to spit out again. The face of Big Brother swam into his mind, displacing that of O'Brien. Just as he had done a few days earlier, he slid a coin out of his pocket and looked at it, the face gazing at him, heavy, calm, protecting. But what kind of smile was hidden beneath the dark mustache? Like a leaden knell, the words came back to him. War is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. Chapter 2. It was the middle of the morning, and Winston had left his cubicle to go to the lavatory. A solitary figure was coming towards him from the other end of the long, brightly lit corridor. It was the girl with dark hair. 4 days had gone by since the evening when he had run into her outside the junk shop. As she came near, he saw that her right arm was in a sling, not noticeable at a distance because it was of the same color as her overalls. Probably she had crushed her hand while swinging round one of the big kaleidoscope on the plots of novels were roughed in. It was a common accident in the fiction department. They were perhaps 4 meters apart when the girl stumbled and fell almost flat on her face. A sharp cry of pain was wrung out of her. She must have fallen right on the injured arm. Winston stopped short. The girl had risen to her knees. Her face had turned a milky yellow color, against which her mouth stood out redder than ever. Her eyes were fixed on his with an appealing expression that looked more like fear than pain. Let's see. They were perhaps four. Oh, I already read that part. Sorry. A curious emotion stirred in Winston's heart. In front of him was an enemy who was trying to kill him. In front of him also was a human creature in pain and perhaps with a broken bone. Already he had instinctively started forward to help her. In the moment when he had seen her fall on the bandaged arm, it had been as though he felt the pain in his own body. "You're hurt," he said. "It's nothing, my arm. It'll be all right in a second." She spoke as though her heart was fluttering. She had certainly turned very pale. "You haven't broken anything?" "No, I'm all right. It hurt for a moment, that's all." She held out her free hand to him, and he helped her up. She had regained some of her color and appeared very much better. "It's nothing," she repeated shortly. "I only gave my wrist a bit of a bang. Thanks, comrade." And with that she walked on in the direction in which she had been going, as briskly as though it had really been nothing. The whole incident could not have taken as much as half a minute. Not to let one's feelings appear in one's face was a habit that had acquired the status of an instinct, and in any case they had been standing straight in front of a telescreen when the thing happened. Nevertheless, it had been very difficult not to betray a momentary surprise, for in the 2 or 3 seconds when he was helping her up, the girl had slipped something into his hand. There was no question that she had done it intentionally. It was something small and flat. As he passed through the lavatory door, he transferred it to his pocket and felt it with the tips of his fingers. It was a scrap of paper folded in a square. While he stood at the urinal, he managed with a little more fingering to get it unfolded. Obviously there must be a message of some kind written on it. For a moment, he was tempted to take it into one of the water closets and read it at once, but that would be shocking folly. As he knew, there was no place where you could be more certain that the telescreens were watching continuously. He went back to his cubicle, sat down, threw the fragment of paper casually among the other paper on the desk, put on his spectacles, and hitched the speechwrite towards him. 5 minutes, he told himself. 5 minutes at the very least. His heart bumped in his breast with frightening loudness. Fortunately, the piece of work he was engaged on was more routine, the rectification of a long list of figures, not needing close attention. Whatever was written on the paper, it must have been some kind of political meaning. So far as he could see, there were 2 possibilities. One much more likely was that the girl was an agent of the thought police, just as he had feared. He did not know why the thought police should choose to deliver their messages in such a fashion, but perhaps they had their reasons. The thing that was written on the paper might be a threat, a summons, an order to commit suicide, a trap of some description. But there was another, wilder possibility that kept raising its head, though he was trying vainly to suppress it. This was what the message... this was that the message did not come from the thought police at all, but from some kind of underground organization. Perhaps the Brotherhood existed after all. Perhaps the girl was part of it. No doubt the idea was absurd, but it had sprung into his mind in the very instant of feeling the scrap of paper in his hand. It was not till a couple of minutes later that the other, more possible explanation had occurred to him. And even now, his intellect told him that the message probably meant death. Still, that was not what he believed, and the unreasonable hope persisted and that his heart banged, and it was with difficulty that he kept his voice from trembling as he murmured the figures into the speak right. He rolled up the complicated bundle of work and slid it into the pneumatic tube. 8 minutes had gone by. He readjusted his spectacles on his nose, sighed, and drew the top of it. And drew the next batch of work towards him, with the scrap of paper on top of it. He flattened it out. On it was written in a large, unformed handwriting, "I love you." Give me just a sec here. I need to change my position real quick. Okay, and back. Sorry about that. Okay. For several seconds, he was too stunned even to throw the incriminating evidence into the memory hole. When he did so, although he knew very much the danger of showing too much interest, he could not resist reading it once again, just to make sure that the words were really there. For the rest of the morning, it was very difficult to work. What was even worse was having to focus his mind on a series of niggling jobs, was the need to conceal his agitation from the telescreen. He felt as though a fire were burning in his body. Lunch in the hot, crowded, noise-filled canteen was torment. He had hoped to be alone for a little while during the lunch hour, but as bad luck would have it, the imbecile Parsons flopped down beside him, the tang of his sweat almost defeating the tinny smell of stew, and kept up a stream of talk about the preparations for Hate Week. He was particularly enthusiastic about the papier-mâché model of Big Brother's head, about 2 meters wide, which was being made for the occasion by his daughter's troupe of spies. The irritating thing was that the racket of voices, Winston could hardly hear what Parsons was saying and was constantly having to ask for some fatuous remark to be repeated. Just once he caught a glimpse of the girl at a table with 2 other girls at the far end of the room. She appeared not to have seen him, and he did not look into that direction again. We're going to have to stop it right here. We made it to page 91. Chapter 2, actually. And this is getting good. We are reading George Orwell's 1984. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. As always, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.